Hi everyone, welcome back to the channel. If you're new here, I usually post videos about lactation specific topics and I'd love to have you be part of the community. Lately I've been sharing a little bit about my pregnancy journey and postpartum experience, and today's video I think is one of the most important videos that I've ever made. I'd really like to raise the awareness about postpartum preeclampsia. I'll tell you about my experience. I experienced postpartum preeclampsia and ended up having to be rehospitalized after my daughter's birth. But I'd really like to raise awareness about this because a lot of people are unaware that preeclampsia can happen to you in the postpartum period. It usually tends to happen 2 days after delivery, but can happen for up to 6 weeks after delivery. So today I'm going to share something about my experience and the importance of advocating for yourself. And I'm also just going to give you a little bit of background information on the seriousness of postpartum preeclampsia. So preeclampsia is when a pregnant person has high blood pressure and also can have protein in their urine. This can happen during pregnancy, but few people know that it can happen after pregnancy. Some of the common symptoms are feeling dizzy, headache, swelling. Some swelling's normal after birth, but severe swelling of your limbs, your face, pain in your right upper quadrant, so your abdomen, your right upper side of your abdomen or shoulder area, nausea, vomiting, blurred vision, a rapid weight gain, which happens when your body is holding fluid. So these are all things to look for with postpartum preeclampsia. With my experience, and when I was postpartum, on the second day postpartum actually is when I started to feel symptoms. And I started to feel symptoms a little different than the ones I just described. I just started to feel dizzy. I did feel dizzy and I felt a little spacey. And I felt what I described as far away. So I just didn't feel like I was in my body. I felt like I was kind of floating somewhere in the background. I just felt weird and not right. My blood pressure had also been creeping up. My blood pressure was completely normal throughout my entire pregnancy. In fact, my blood pressure tends to run low. For those of you who are in the healthcare field, I was like low hundreds, like 110 over 60 or 70 during my pregnancy. And then during my postpartum recovery period after my C-section, it started to be like 145 to 150s for the upper number. And that, as a nurse, started to raise some concern in my mind. But my amazing nursing team really advocated for me when I was in the hospital. We had, they did end up drawing preeclampsia labs when I was there and testing my urine, and everything came back negative at the time, so they cleared me to go home. I was home for less than 24 hours when I started to feel worse and worse and worse. Throughout the day after I went home, I felt like my blood pressure was just going up. I felt like kind of like chest tightness and just really tired if I stood up, and pain. And I was checking my blood pressure throughout the day. So around 3 p.m. the day after I went home, I called my doctor because my blood pressure was 150 over 90 and was starting to worry me, especially with the symptoms I was feeling. And they told me that they would start to be concerned if my blood pressure was 160 over 110, which to me seems really high, but I was trying hard to be the patient and not the provider. So I just kind of continued to monitor my blood pressure from home. And they did give me a medication to clear fluid off of my body, which didn't end up clearing any of the fluid off my body. I was really swollen and retaining a lot of fluids. And then that night when I went to bed, I couldn't sleep. I just felt like this sense of impending doom. And I felt like if I fell asleep, something really bad was going to happen to me. And I felt like I couldn't breathe when I laid down. So I tried to sleep for probably an hour and I just couldn't fall asleep. So I went back out to the living room where my mom was watching the baby for me, actually, and I checked my blood pressure and it was 160/110. And I was still hesitant to call back my OB because it was the middle of the night, and I'm so thankful that my mom really encouraged me to call back because she was worried about me. And I called back and they told me that if my blood pressure was sustaining over 160/110, then I should come in. And I was able to go back in with my baby, and it was the middle of the night, and it was really stressful. It was really stressful to finally be home after spending 3 days in the hospital and to have to go back. But we did. We packed ourselves up and we packed the baby up in the middle of the night and drove to the hospital. And I was worried even about driving to the hospital because I felt so bad that I was worried that something bad was going to happen to me on the way to the hospital. Because with preeclampsia, one of the major concerns is that you're high risk for seizures and strokes with that high blood pressure, organ damage. There's a lot of things that can happen when your blood pressure is that high. And I was nervous, and maybe I should have called an ambulance. I don't know. We didn't. We drove to the hospital at like 3 or 4 in the morning. We got there. I was readmitted. They drew labs. The labs, when I arrived, confirmed that I did have preeclampsia. And then I was sitting in triage. And when I was in triage waiting for the room they were going to move me to, I was trying to get some sleep because I hadn't slept in 4 or 5 days. I hadn't slept in like 4 or 5 days having a newborn at home. I just hadn't slept well, and I was trying to lay down and sleep. And every time that I laid flat, my oxygen level was dropping to the low 90s. And as a nurse, I knew that wasn't right. And it explained why when I was at home I was trying to sleep and I couldn't sleep because literally my oxygen was dropping and I couldn't breathe. So they did a CAT scan. They found out I had some fluid on my lungs, and I ended up being admitted to the labor and delivery unit to receive an infusion of magnesium. So magnesium is given to help lower blood pressure and also to prevent seizures. And it was one of the hardest experiences I've ever had. So if any of you have ever been on magnesium postpartum because of preeclampsia, let me know in the comments how you felt on it. But for me, it was really awful. You're really thirsty. They don't let you eat. You just feel like not right in your mind. You have to use the bathroom frequently. You just feel really lousy. And in fact, when you are on magnesium, you're not even allowed per hospital policy to be alone with your baby. You need someone else there helping you with your baby because because of the mental state that it leaves you in. So actually, I ended up sending my baby home with my husband, and he took her to her pediatrician's appointment. Her first pediatrician's appointment I missed because I was in the hospital, and baby stayed at home with my sister, my dad, and my husband, and they took turns overnight taking care of her, which was so amazing, while my mom stayed with me in the hospital and took care of me. So we ended up in the hospital for 2 days, and it was really hard. It was really emotional, and I had a hard recovery. It was really hard to go from that feeling of not being able to breathe. And even when I went home and was discharged a second time, I still wasn't feeling quite right. And I was having still like a hard time taking deep breaths. And I was having what I later realized was a lot of referred pain from my cesarean delivery in my upper right shoulder, which still made me worried that I was having symptoms of high blood pressure and the difficulty breathing that I was having before. And I was totally sleep deprived. And all I wanted to do was go home, but I was really nervous about going home with the symptoms I was having, that something bad might happen to me still. So, long story short, thankfully, I got home. I still felt pretty lousy for a couple of days. I was still experiencing pain for a couple of days, but I slowly started to feel better, and my blood pressure was regulating. And thankfully, by my first follow-up appointment with my OB at 6 weeks, my blood pressure had completely returned to normal. I didn't have any long-term organ damage. We're really worried about kidneys and liver with those high blood pressures, but thankfully I didn't have any long-term damage. And I just want to take a minute to reflect on the fact that I'm a nurse. I was experiencing symptoms. I had to advocate for myself quite a bit to be rehospitalized. And I just wanted to share the story with all of you, because if you don't know what to look for, if you're not in healthcare, you really need to advocate for yourself, because it can be really dangerous. And if you're not feeling quite right, doesn't matter if you're able to check your blood pressure at home or not. If you're not feeling right, or you're feeling any of these symptoms, or you're feeling concerned at all, reach out to your OB or go back to the emergency room and get care, because this is serious. A lot of women die postpartum because of complications of postpartum preeclampsia. There's not enough awareness about it, and not enough parents know to advocate for themselves when they're not feeling right. They don't even know that this is something that happens, and it's really serious. So to me, if anything good can come out of a really hard situation that I face, it would be to share it with all of you and raise awareness, so that when you deliver your babies, if any of you experience any of these symptoms, hopefully I can help you in identifying what's going on and speaking to your doctor early to make sure that you get the treatment you need, so that you can be healthy and happy taking care of your baby, and not be at risk for some of the more complicated things that can happen due to postpartum preeclampsia. So that's my story. Thank you for listening. I really hope that this helps somebody out there. And if anything at all, just going into pregnancy knowing that it's something that can happen, or going into delivery knowing that it's something to look for postpartum, is huge. So thank you. Hope you have a great day, and I will talk to you all soon. Bye.